During the last tutorial, I showed you how to go into Photoshop and open up a new file or to open up a file to currently be working on. For this lesson, we're going to be talking about basic photo corrections, but I want to show you another way of opening up some files using the program called Bridge. Now, if you already have Bridge installed, you can follow along with this part. Otherwise, you can just kind of watch while I do it, and you can open it the way that I showed you during the last lesson. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to switch over to Bridge. So Bridge is a great program to go ahead and install on your computer anyway, just because of the fact that it works really well for a lot of different purposes. One, it's kind of like if you have your Media Explorer open, which would look like this on most computers. You can go in, you can find what you need, and it's right there. But this also gives you a couple other options. Bridge will allow you to use different workspaces, just like any of the other Adobe plans do. You can come in here, you can check things like metadata on the images or on your projects. You can add metadata to your projects. You can also print contact sheets. A contact sheet is where you're going to have a whole bunch of little images on one sheet of paper. So if you took a bunch of photos of something, or if you did a bunch of projects and you need to print something that shows all the little different things, or if you just need to create a PDF out of those things, you can do that as well. And that's simply done by dragging images up and dropping them on to what's called a contact sheet. With metadata, you can come in, you can choose a photograph that you have, you can add in your personal metadata information, you can see how the photo was taken, where it was taken, who it was taken by. You can change any of them, like the coordinates. You can add in locations, all different kinds of stuff into your metadata. Now with these are not actual photographs I took with a camera, but these are actually screenshots. It still comes in handy because you can come in here and put in a keyword and say that you were you took a bunch of pictures of your dog. You have two different dogs. You have a dog named Gus and a dog named Bob. And you want to organize your images so that you can pull up all the pictures of Gus at the same time. You can come in here and you can type in keywords. You can type Gus's name in here. Then later on, when you come in and want to find an image, you can go right up here and type in Gus as well. And it will pull up every image that has Gus's name in it. You can also do that by renaming the file itself. So like, instead of photo editor 1, if I named it Gus, it would do that. But then you have to keep track of like Gus 1, Gus 2, Gus 3, Gus 4 as you keep going so that you don't create multiple files with the same name. So using this keyword down here is helpful. It's also helpful to do description. With description, what I think of is if you ever go through a box of like your grandmother's photos and you flip over the photo, on the back is written Gus and Bob in the backyard, summer of 1995 or something like that. You can do that in the description. That way, 20 years down the road, when your kids or family are looking through your old photos, which are now digital, they can look at this description and be able to tell what it was. They don't have to guess like who was in the photo or anything. Okay, so these are two really good areas. If you ever have the idea to start digitally organizing, Bridge is a great program to actually start that in. So that is some basic parts of Bridge, but what you can do is you can also go in and be able to look at images you've created. So right now I'll go up here to Essential, so just so you can see everything. This was an assignment for my multimedia class. This is all their projects. So I have them on one screen. I can look at them. I can also see a preview over here. I can see some of the key information. But this way I can go in and I can be like, if you had 3 images, and I know that everybody does it where you are working on it and you have image 1 final, image 1 final 2, image 1 final final, that type of stuff. You can come in here and actually be able to click on them and see which one is the correct one. So what I'm going to do to open the image for today is I'm going to come up here to this PC, and I have a file created on my desktop for this class. So I'm going to find that file just like you would in your Media Explorer, and it's under 210 right here. and we're in lesson 2 today. Here's the image that I want to use. So I can just double click on it and it'll open it in Photoshop for me. Yes, it's extra steps, but there are times when those couple extra steps that I just did would be a lot faster than going through Media Explorer. You can also come into Bridge and you can do some of the just basic changes to it. So if you want to like make something a little bit darker, a little bit lighter, or do a little color correction, or you might need a new crop, you can do those things in this program. Okay. So again, if you didn't go through Bridge with me, you just simply go to Photoshop and that new, or go to open right here on that home screen whenever you're on it. So if I go back to home, right here to open, and you can open that up. Okay. So here's my image. What I want you to do is press and hold Control and hit 0, and it's going to fill up your screen. And now we're going to talk about some different tools. So we're going to talk a little bit about the crop tool, the straighten tool, as well as the healing tools. And we may even dive into the clone stamp a little bit. Okay, so what we're going to do is the first thing I want you to do is I want to talk about cropping. So with cropping, that's this tool right here. And we can do a couple different things with this crop tool. So up here at the top, you can set it to a certain size. You can tell it what size you want it to be. You can go to its original ratio, but we're going to do an 8.5 by 11 by 300. We're going to go to this preset. And so what it's going to do is it's going to give us that little screen that looks like this. Now, our image is horizontal, not vertical, so we need to flip it. So these two little arrows right here, we'll just flip it so it goes the opposite direction. Also, another nice thing about this is if you click on this little level right here next to the word straighten, if your image is off and you need to make sure like the horizontal, the horizon line is straight, or maybe the side of a building is straight, you can grab this straighten tool and you simply draw a line along whatever you want it to straighten to, and it'll straighten it for you. It'll just make that slight adjustment. You can see now that I straightened it just a itty bit. So if you look really close right up here, there's a little bitty white line. And what it's going to do is it's going to recrop that image based on that 8.5 by 11. It's going to recrop that image, but it's going to straighten that line for us. I picked a bad photo. There's no straight lines in this that we would need to line up with. So just kind of play with it, see what it does, maybe just adjust it just a little bit. And then whenever you get it to where you want, you can also move this. So I'm going to click in the middle of one of these squares and I'm going to move it slightly to the left. I want to have this entire leaf in the shot. So I can move it this way, or you can move it back, or you can move it up and down. Now remember, we did cut off a little bit of that white. So now that white's going to peek through a little bit. So all we have to do is click and drag it in from the corners to make sure none of that white is showing. When you get it to where you want it, you're just going to come up here to the top of the screen and hit the check mark. Ooh, and it got really big, so Control 0 again, and it's going to zoom it back to this, fit the screen size for us. That original image that we were working with was only a 72 resolution, and I just blew it up to 300. So that's why some of this is going to look a little bit more soft and out of focus, is because if you go from small to big, it can mess with your pixelation a little bit. That's okay for what we're doing today. We're getting a good idea. Okay. Next, let's talk about these healing tools. So with the healing tools, you have 3 different options. So what I want you to do is come over here to your background, and we're going to make 3 different copies. And with these copies, then we can do the different things on them, and we're not messing with that original image. And then you can choose which one you like the best, or which one looks the best for this, and we'll go from there. So you're going to click on background, click and drag it down to that square with the plus sign. Then it's going to say background copy. We're going to click on the words background copy, double click on there, and we're going to change this one to spot. I'm going to go ahead and call it spot healing because that's the actual tool. So I'll do spot heal. Then I'm going to click on spot heal. I'm going to drag it down. And this one, I'm going to rename it by double clicking on the word spot heal. And I'm going to call it just heal. Okay, we're going to do it one more time and we're going to name it patch. Actually, I lied to you. We're going to do a couple extra because I want to show you the content aware tool as well. So we're going to do patch. We're going to drag it down, do content aware. And then one more, and we'll go ahead and play with the clone stamp today. Okay, so we have spot heal, heal, patch, content aware, and clone going from bottom to top. Now, as we do these, I'll show you how to move these around and how to open and close them. So it doesn't really matter what order they're in now. We're just going to make sure we're on the correct one whenever we're doing this. Okay, so I'm going to click on the eyeballs next to everything except for the spot heal. Also, we want the spot heal layer to be activated. So you're going to click on it so that it's a lighter gray than the rest of the layers. That's how you know you're on the right layer. If you're on the wrong layer, let's say my layer panel looked like this and I want it to paint. You don't need to do this step. Just watch me while I do it. I wanted to paint and I came over here and I'm like, oh, I'll grab my paintbrush. I come over here to paint and it's telling me, no, you can't do anything. It's because I'm on the wrong layer. Okay. So always check which layer you're on. Or if you're, if you make a selection and you're like, delete, 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 trying to get rid of that selection and nothing's happening, again, check your layers. That's the first thing you always do whenever we're in the classroom and anybody comes up to me and asks me a question, I always tell them automatically do two things. Check your layers. If you're on the wrong layer, just fix it. All I had to do was go over here and click the right layer. Or two, do Control D and deselect, because sometimes by accident, you can make a selection that's literally this big. You may not be able to even see it. You may not catch it. It may be in something that's really light because these little marching ants, sometimes when they're in a light spot, you can't even see them. And then you're on the right layer, but you're like, why isn't it letting me paint? Okay, so that is why. So do Control D. Anytime you're having any issues, check the layer and deselect, okay? So I did Control D now. On the correct layer, I'm on spot heal. So let's talk about the spot healing tool. So over here, right about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 down is your healing tools. And the first one we're going to do is this spot healing tool. It looks like a Band-Aid with a little half circle by it. Now with this tool, I'm going to make it bigger because I'm going to get rid of this blueberry that's back here. So I'm going to try and find one that's close to the same size as that blueberry. It's going to be a little bit easier if you can cover it. Now, if you have multiple items next to each other and you can't do this, you can do any size. But for what we're doing, I'm going to go a little bit bigger, and I also want to push my hardness down. I'm at 10. Now, with this tool, all you do is color over it with that, and you can remove it. Now, I'm going to go back. I'm going to Control Z and go back so I can kind of show you. Now, if I was just to go over one part of this, you can see that it doesn't do very well. So I'm going to Control Z again. What you want to do is you want to make sure you get rid of all of that area. What it's doing is it's taking the information from around it and putting it on top of it. So it's kind of judging it for you. It's going to read it. This one works really well on things that the area is pretty close to the same color or same textures. That it has something pretty easy to read. This one I use a lot for things like, when I'm doing portraits, if I need to remove blemishes off somebody or dirt off their skin, this works really well. You can soften that edge and it makes it almost like a circle. So your result sometimes will have that like roundish feel. So you can kind of see there's a little, even though we colored over it, it still kind of has that roundish feel. Okay. Again, it really depends on what you're working with on how well this comes out. Okay, so that's the first one. And what it's doing is if I color right here where my cursor is, it's pulling information from right around it. So now we're going to come over and we're going to try the heal tool. So I'm going to close my spot healing and open up my heal, but I make sure I activate the heal layer as well by clicking on it. The heal tool is the second tool down in here. And again, I'm going to come up here. I'm going to make my cursor a little bit bigger. And I'm going to come over here and I'm going to make it a little bit softer. I'm going to go down to about 30, okay? Now, with this tool, if I try and click, it's going to tell me, nope, you can't use it. You have to tell me where to choose from. So where with the spot healing, if I went right here, it would choose from around it, around the cursor. For this tool, I have to tell it where to pick from. And so I'm going to tell it to pick from right over in here. Why am I doing right over in here and not down in here? Because it already has that same kind of look to it. It's already slightly thrown out of focus. It's a little bit brighter up here than it is down here. So you want to kind of pick an area where this is helpful. Now, real life examples of this. If you're doing a portrait, back to that portrait again, and somebody has a blemish that's kind of like right on the edge of a shadow or has a slightly different skin tone than somewhere else on the face. This comes in handy because you can make sure that it matches up right with the exact area you want it to match up with. So you press and hold Alt, and you can see my cursor change to this little bitty dot. That's going to be my target area. So I just click it, and then I can come over here and kind of color over it just like we did earlier, but it's going to, and then when I let go, it's going to kind of blend those edges for me. So for this instance, this tool worked a little bit better than the spot healing because I had a little bit more control over it. Now, cons for this tool, same as the last one. You're going to get a little bit more of that round feel, especially if you don't soften your edges. Okay, so you have to be pretty specific with this tool. Okay, let's do the next one. So I'm going to close the heal, open the patch, and activate the patch. Now, the patch tool will allow you to not make a circle. So if you go into your healing tools, it's the next one down. It's going to allow you to not make a perfect circle. This comes in handy because not everything that you're going to come across is going to be circular that you're trying to move or get rid of. So what you're going to do is simply click and draw around it. Okay, and I'm going to draw a little wider because I know I want that shadow to be gone as well. Now, the good thing about this tool is you tell it where you want it to kind of copy from. So again, we can come back over here, which seemed to work the best the last time. We can click and drag it over here. This tool is also really good if you're doing something like clouds or bricks or water works really well with this tool. But with the bricks, you can drag it over to another area and almost line up the brick pattern exactly the same. And so it will fill in that area by you telling it where to. Sometimes with the healing tools, what it'll do is it'll not align those lines perfectly like in a brick, and you'll have to go back and manually fix them. So this, you kind of tell it what to do. So now if we Control D to deselect, you can see that it has a little bit more of that gone. Now, you can see a little bit of the edging down here. You can go back and redo it, like patch it again and just kind of go back a couple times and repatch. And so now it's almost gone just by me dragging a little bit off. You can also just soften your edges while you're creating the path. So let's say, this was my path, my patch tool. I can just soften those edges a little bit right here with diffusion. Okay. So that comes in handy. Cons about the tool is sometimes you can go a little too big or a little too small, and you have those little edges that you have to come back and fix, but it's a pretty good tool. Okay, I'm going to turn off the patch tool and turn on the content aware, and again, activate that layer. Now, the good thing about content aware is that you have a little bit more control over it. So I can use any of my selection tools. So I can, come up here and I could do a lasso tool, or I could do the poly if I need it, like square edges. I'm just going to go ahead and do my lasso tool. And I'm going to draw kind of a rough shape around this one. And I'm going to come up here and I'm going to do it under File, Content Aware Fill. So it's under File, Content Aware Fill. And it's going to give me this crazy screen. Okay, what the screen is doing is it's reading multiple areas. This is really nice when you have something that has a lot going on in it and you need it to tell, like, specifically you want to pick from this one specific area. It also seems to clean up the edges a little bit. Like I said in the last video, this tool is an AI tool, so it does learn upon itself and it gets better as you keep using it. You can also tell it, like, hey, I want it to pick the board, but I don't want it to pick this edge of this berry. So I can come in here with this my cursor now and kind of draw around the berry. I don't want it to pick up any of this green on the leaf. I don't want it to pick up any of the blue on this berry or this berry. Okay, and you may be going, okay, I don't see any of that in my final image over here that I'm looking at. Right now for this one, it's not, but let's see if I can get it to pick up some of it. You can see that it changed drastically. If you watch right here while I'm doing this, you can see that it does change what it's reading a little bit. Okay. So you can have a little bit more control over this and tell it, like, oh, I don't like that. I want to get rid of a little bit more. And it allows you to have more say in it. Okay. When you get it to where you want, reading to what you want, you just simply come over here and hit OK. And if I do Control D, you can see that it's gone. So the more we kind of go up these steps, the more control you're kind of going to keep having. And it all depends on what you're trying to do. If it's something really small and simple and you can just go boop and get rid of it, then the healing tools work really well. If it's something that's going to have more detail and you're going to have to pay more attention to, Content Aware works better. Now, I will warn you, Content Aware does create a new layer. So it makes it non-destructive, which is a pro, but you can't go back and just edit the edges a little bit using one of the other tools until you select them both. And I press and hold Shift and select them both. And then I can come up here and I can just merge those layers. So that's under these four little lines right here, and I can merge the layers. And then now I can make changes to the edge, but it's no longer non-destructive. It actually, destructive means that it is going to affect that layer individually. Non-destructive means that it's going to add a layer to it that is not damaging the image in the first place or not changing the image in the first place. Sorry, I should explain those. Those are two terms that I will refer to quite a bit, as whether or not a tool is destructive or non-destructive. Okay. Then the last one we're going to do on here to kind of make changes to this is we're going to do the clone stamp. So with the clone stamp, we're going to open up that layer, make sure it's selected, and we're going to come over here and we're going to find the clone stamp, which is right here. So two below the healing tools. Make sure you have the regular clone stamp chosen. I'm going to make mine a little bit bigger, and I'm also going to make it a little bit softer. Now, think of the clone stamp as, you know, like just a copier. So what you're going to do is you're going to tell it, I want to copy at this spot to somewhere else, but you have to pay attention. If you have your edge too hard, it's going to create almost like a sticker feel. So if that's what you're going for, great, you need a hard edge. But on something like this, where we have these little lines in the wood, if we're trying to clone this one right here, then we would have to perfectly line those lines up, which sometimes you're going to have to do. But with the harder the brush, the more perfect those lines have to be. If you soften it a little bit, you can make a little bit of adjustment. Now, you can do two different ways of doing this. One, we can do it straight onto the same layer. So if I take this one and I copy it and start cloning it, I can clone it straight onto the layer. It's going to be a destructive tool. Or I can set the clone for where I want and create a new layer and then do that onto the new layer. That way, if I wanted to move it around or change it at all, it would be its own layer and it would just be that blueberry. Okay, so let's go ahead and do it that way. So what we're going to do is we're going to click new layer. We now have layer 1 up here, but we need to be on clone first because we got to set it. So with this tool, just like with the healing brush, we have to tell it where we want to go from. And as I move my cursor, you can see that it's like reading where it wants to read at the moment, but I want to tell it where to read. So I'm going to press and hold Alt, and I'm going to take my target, and I'm going to go right up here on the top of this blueberry. Now, if I move my cursor, you can see it's mimicking the top of that blueberry. And I'm going to select layer 1, and I'm going to come right over here, and I'm going to start cloning that blueberry. Now you can see there is a crosshair on my original blueberry. That's kind of telling me this is where you're pulling from. And I can draw over it. Now to reset it, because if I keep going, it's going to keep reading what's already there, which is nice because I don't want it to pick up the other blueberry yet. But if I was to pick up the other blueberry, I'd just have to unclick. And then I could go again, and now it'll pick up that new blueberry we made, and we could keep copying it over and over and over and over and over again. Okay, so what I want you to do to complete this assignment is I want you to keep playing with this. Go ahead and make a couple more blueberries on here. Go crazy, you know. Choose which of the tools that you want to use. You can play with a couple of the tools. Do everything. If you want to remove something, you can now do it on whichever these layers that you want. The layers that you don't like, let's say, I don't like the spot healing tool. I don't like the way it turned out. I can, just delete that layer. I liked the way it turned out on the content aware. So I'm going to keep that layer. I'm going to go ahead and trash my clone one because we did it on a separate layer. And now I can still see that one, but I have my clone up here, my content aware up here, and I have my little blueberry down here. And you can keep going. So now, as long as I'm on this content aware, I can press and hold Alt. Maybe I want to make a copy of this one now. And then I'll go back up to that layer 1 just so I don't damage anything I've already done. And I can kind of keep playing with it. And I know what we're doing right here, right now, is not going to look the most realistic, but whenever you're using it in different reasons, you will be able to make these so that, they blend a little bit more or they look a little bit more realistic, okay? Then once you get this all done, I'm going to have you save it. So go up to File and Save. Then you're also going to come over here and that's going to save it as a PSD file because we have multiple layers. Make sure you have the layers open that you want me to see. You're going to come over here and do flatten image. So remember, over on layer panel, these little lines, we're going to click on those little lines and do flatten image. It's going to ask you if you want to discard the hidden layers. Sure, we don't need them anymore. And then you're going to do File and Save As. And again, you're going to change this to a JPEG. You can call it whatever you want. And I'm going to hit Save. Yes, maximum, perfect. And there you go. And then this is what you're going to turn into me when you get done playing with it. Okay, if you have any questions, feel free to shoot me an email and I'll get you some answers. And just kind of have fun and play with this and enjoy.